Now we have the passcodes up. We're getting a couple more people. Why don't we just do some quick introductions to start? So you can either post it to chat or just say something. So I'm Tom Gibbons. I'll be kind of leading this session today, talking about using AI assistants. I teach at the College of Science Scholastica. Um, been teaching computers for a long time, but we also do a lot of work with uh, K through 12 schools, and we've worked a lot with um, different curriculums, particularly the um, mobile CSP curriculum for the AP CS Principles class and the CS Awesome curriculum for the Java class. So I teach a lot of the CS Principles course, but to college students, and I teach the a Java 1 course again to college students. All right, who else wants to introduce themselves?
With audio or with
With audio is
text?
great. I like audio.
Okay, so I'm Rodolfo Pinto. I'm from Portugal, and I work in an island called Madeira, and I'm a computer science coordinator here in primary schools. And I'm lucky to be also a CodeOrg CSF facilitator here in the region and in the country. And I'm interested in talking about AI because now everybody talks about AI, but people forget to talk about computer science first. So I'm here to try to, not here, but in my region, to alert people that before they talk about AI, they need to understand what is computer science to be able to be an expert
Right.
about AI. Thank you.
All right. Liz, do you want to say something?
Yes, hi. I'm one of the administrators that is working from the event planning company here, but I'm really excited to learn about this stuff too.
Okay. So yeah, we'll see how this goes for this. Let's see. I think I'm going to just get started here. Let me share my screen. All right. So you should be able to see that, I think.
Yes.
So, um, so I just want to kind of talk a little bit about how I see what I see large language models being used and the industry expectations of them. We'll talk a little bit about prompt techniques and Copilot stuff, and then talk about what we've had to do as far as adapting assignments so that students, with the expectation that students are using AI as an assistant for this stuff. Um, so, kind of the goals is just to make sure we're all aware of what these large language models, and I'll use the term large language models and AI. I mean, AI is a broader field, but in this context, we'll be referring, when I refer to AI, I'll be referring to these large language models. And so these are like the Chat GPTs, the Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, and a number of other ones there. And we'll talk a little bit about templates that you might want to share with students as far as coding, or just suggestions on how they can use this AI for to get better results here. And then again, we'll talk a little bit about what I have to do as far as curriculum changes and stuff like that. Um, This is all relatively new, so it's been a year and a half since Chat GPT was released, but we've seen a lot of growth. I think we've all seen that its impact around. One thing I was surprised at so I was teaching coding this fall, and I was teaching upper level college students how to, some code where you're doing some advanced Android programming there. And after a couple of weeks, I, asked them, so, are you using AI, or what is your doing, what is your level of help with that? And two of the students who had just come off summer internships with programming companies both said, oh, yes, I use the AI all the time because I used it all summer long for my internship. It was an expectation from my employer that we would use this. And in talking to other students and other employers, that's what I'm hearing a lot, is that it is now, when the college students, go out the internships, or when they graduate, start getting jobs, they're expected to, be able to use AI, these large language models, to improve their efficiency to help. And it makes sense, because they're so helpful in tracking down errors, writing code, helping out, that, if you're an employer, you want to be as efficient as possible for that stuff. So we're certainly seeing that, and that kind of caught me by surprise. I didn't think that would be happening so fast. I mean, I didn't know employers would be doing that. And so it really made us reevaluate how we bring AI, and the need to bring AI into our classes with it. And I think we've found that it really helps a lot. So, one of the problems we run into a lot is coding errors can often stop students, or, and developers in general, in their tracks. I talk to people who teach writing or something like that. And, if you're writing, if your assignment is to write a poem and you're stuck on one word, you can skip over and keep writing the rest of the word and see how the poem sounds and work out the whole thing, come back and do that. But often when you're coding and you get, a syntax error or some errors running, you can't keep running the program. It just stops running. And it's really, for a lot of students, it just stops them in the tracks, and until they can get that error resolved. And the fact that you can go to an AI and get that answer, get that issue kind of fixed, in minutes, rather than, again, often I have students working at home. It might be the next day before they can track me down or track someone down to get the answer. And so often an error, introduces, a day or two lag before they can get going again. And we certainly see this very beneficial for this. I don't know, have you had much experience with coding and using AI?
When I answer,
Yeah, sure.
I'm not an expert in coding. My background is physical education, but lives change, of course. But I use a lot AI in ChatGPT to create content. I invest the $20 for GPT-4 that I create a GPT special to create content for the teachers, because I help teachers to integrate computer science in the classrooms. So I teach a GPT how we make the classroom fields, the content that we want to work in the classroom, and I teach the GPT so we can create PowerPoints and goals for each year for each classroom to run some content that I receive. I make the download and I have to adjust. Of course, we need to supervise this kind of interaction. We cannot accept everything he runs to us. So we have to be very critical in this kind of new world of AI.
Right. So, one thing that I did some looking into is why it seemed like these language models are very good at coding. So I did some work looking at why, and it was interesting when they were working on the GPT models, the earlier ones. They first released them, to some beta testers and a lot of testers, but it was a lot of computer people who were doing the testing. And one of the common things they tried was just seeing if it could answer coding questions. And um, initially it did not do very well at that. So they their feedback from early beta testers, they can't do coding, and so they added a whole bunch of training data to help it improve coding stuff. And it does make sense because there's a lot of examples on the internet of code, broken code with questions and answers and stuff like that. And so after all that training, these LLMs have gotten a lot better at understanding code, understanding questions, and then producing good, or producing code, but especially at this beginning level. It's a little more challenging when we get to more of the advanced coding levels, but for what we train in schools, we certainly do that. Now, we haven't been using any of the co-pilots that are integrated with the IDEs. We use a number of different IDEs, but the main Copilot is GitHub Copilot. And there's not a free version currently of that. And places like Microsoft will use that or integrate that into their environments. But I've talked to a number of students who use it and pay for it. And so I think in the future we will see free versions or versions available for students of this, but right now it's not generally available, or we haven't found a great Copilot that's available. We'll talk about a couple options in a later slide. So I guess the one thing I often talk to my students about is just, how to write just a basic prompt here. And the most common one is debugging here. And so a couple of things I stress to my students is that they need to, remind, they should state the language that they're working in here. And it helps to say that they're a beginning programmer or they're learning to program. And often it does help to say it's a school assignment. It's kind of strange, but some of our students think they need to trick the AI into helping them with their homework because they think it's kind of, illegal or they're cheating here. And they don't want to say this is an assignment or help me do my assignment here because they think it'll say, oh, I can't do your homework for you or something like that. And sometimes it might say something like that, but generally for this sort of work, it actually nice because it puts it in it writes code. Often the code we see in the classroom is much more simpler than the code that's actually out in the real world, as far as the amount of error checking and the type of data structures used and things like that. So if you tell your AI that you are, learning some language, I'm a beginning programmer in what, and we're on this school assignment or something like that, and then you say what the assignment is, and then like here, I often say, then they should just paste in the error for this, and then paste in the code. So like here, this is the example, and it kind of highlighted, the things we let students will switch out. So Java or Python or whatever language they're in, and then what is the goal, and what is the error, and again they're often just pasting that error exactly in this, and then what is their code. And I often talk to students about, we often refer to a website called Stack Overflow, which is a really well-known website where programmers post questions and then answer them. And then the answers are rated here. And so this kind of follows the same sort of syntax that's on Stack Overflow is that I'm getting this error, and here's my code, and then you want a response. And so my understanding is, or belief is, that a lot of these language models have been trained on the same sort of responses that Stack Overflow does here. And again, if you haven't used ChatGPT or Bard before, this is the kind of answer you'll get here. You'll get a list of, like here, we're just working with a typo, and so it should recognize that typo in print for that, and it should describe it, which is nice. It says you should be saying, oops, you should be saying system.out.print line, and you're just saying and not system.out.print. And here's the corrected version of the whole code. So we find that helpful, for this basic syntax checking for this. The other thing we use and we work with students a lot is just having them understand code or explain code to us. And so again, the common prompt again is, I'm a beginning Java programmer or Python programmer, whatever environment you have. Please explain the details of the following code. And then you can paste in some code. And this is very helpful, like if there's an example in the book or online, or some that they've gone over in class and they just don't understand it. And then here we're having to explain the whole thing, but often you can paste in the whole code and then ask them to explain one part of it here. And on the right side, that is actually the examples of this printing out, what it prints out. And it does a fairly good job at explaining these methods. I often now will, when I am just covering new material, I usually explain it, work through a simple example, work through a more advanced example. I then will have the students work through example. But in that process now, I usually have the students open up an AI window and ask the AI to explain the same concept or to give some examples, just so that they can see another explanation of it. Or they can ask particular questions. I often find students are confused or are really wondering about one part of, like a loop or an if-then statement, and they find it helpful if they can then bring up an AI and ask it here. Ask the AI about it rather than because sometimes some students just are not comfortable asking questions like that in class. So I'm going to stop sharing this for a sec. Let me bring in another example. One thing I've found that AI has done is allow us to bring a lot more examples to class. So when, because it used to be a lot of work, create example, write sample code, explain the sample code and stuff. And so now I often use AI to generate this code. So like Pizza Luce is a restaurant in town there. So we're just, I just write an example of this, and I can give this question to AI and it can come up with some code. And here we're giving them some starting code, and then we ask them to rewrite it with procedures or methods, and then there's a more complicated version of it. But the idea of this example, not all of it, but the idea of it was from AI. The code that was generated here was from AI. And then again, I can generate a number of different examples because again, some people might not be interested. Some students are just not interested in display, making an automated pizza ordering system. But some people might be interested in, how do video games do an inventory system where you can go to a blacksmith shop and purchase your, your items for gold or silver or whatever. or someone might be more interested in how we can be detecting cancer, benign or malignant cancer tumors here, or just having fun with the Magic 8 Ball or how their grades are calculated. So again, I can create, rather than just doing one example, I can quickly create a whole series of examples. I can have sample code for all of these available. And so I often in class have the students, they look at one of these problems and pick whichever one you want and look at the starting code. And I often partner them up and they talk about the starting code and go over this, or they do it. Often I'll have not only starting code, but sample solutions here. And then I'll have them look at doing this in class. Again, this is not anything they're turning in or submitting. It's just, practice stuff. So again, I use AI for, explaining code, but I also use AI a fair amount for just generating more code. And then again, having code out there that they can then bring that code in here and ask AI to explain it more to them for this. I just want to talk a little bit about block coding. And again, at the keynote, they were doing microbit coding with blocks. We see this a lot, whether I'm using Scratch or this is mobile. This is MIT App Inventor for Android. So a lot of these, the places are using this. And initially, I struggled to find an AI system to do this. How do you submit block code to your LLM to ask it questions for it? But now a number of the systems, I think this response was from Google's Gemini, let you attach an image. So you can just have your students do a screenshot of the code, or highlight the code they want and save it, and then upload that image to the AI. So that's what I did here. I just took this image from some code, one of our classes, uploaded it, to I think I can say this Gemini, and then asked it, can you explain what this block code does? And it can process it. So now it's interesting because I tell my students they should be identifying the language and explaining some of these things when they're doing prompting. But often the systems are pretty good at recognizing this. So I just said, can you explain this block code? And I didn't say it was an MIT App Inventor, but they should say the AI recognized that this block code appears to be from MIT's App Inventor, a visual program environment targeted for beginners, and gives the link. And that's where this code exactly came from. And it walks through, talks about global variables here that were set up, and explains it, talks about this button click event and selected index ideas here. So it does a pretty good job. I would have, it'll be interesting to see if it improves it over time, because right now the output is almost all text, and they can highlight some text, but they're not outputting images with text, or not generating images. But it would be interesting to see if someday it could talk about the global verbs, and then they would maybe take parts of these. If I were to explain this code, I would talk about this, but then I'd also include a picture of this block in here, and they're not doing that yet. So it's not exactly what I want, but it does a pretty good job. And again, I often have students in block programming. I mean, block programming solves a lot of problems, but still has some issues. So I still have students who will have issues with block programming, and just the fact that they can take a picture of this and submit this to the AI, I find very helpful for this. So I've only tried it with MIT App Inventor. I've not tried it with Scratch or other things, but I think like some of these languages are probably more popular or more often out there than MIT App Inventor. So I would think it would be very good at those also. So here's the other thing that what we get to. So far we've been avoiding the "can you do my homework" kind of prompt for this. Oh, I'm stuck, help me out. And again, just anecdotally, we've had we just had another faculty who taught a course without using large language models and had a pretty significant failure rate in the class 2 years ago. And then this past year, this past fall, taught the course again, but working with students and encouraging to use large language models to help with their debugging and coding, and the pass rate was a lot higher. The one question that comes up is, so is the student learning anything? And we'll try to get to that in a sec. But here, if you want a student, the program to do it, I'm a beginning Java, programmer. I'm doing a school assignment, display this number, and that will work. And certainly with examples like this that are relatively simple, this is like, beginning programming course ones, it can generate an answer. I found that it can generate answers that are a little bit more, again, you have to word this so that it doesn't come up with too complicated of an answer here. And that's why I think if you want students to do this and write these things, they should learn that they want a beginning solution to this, because there are more advanced, concise ways of doing it. But in a beginning computer course, this is what would be done. And this is very similar to the answer that I, would be giving my students also for this. But a lot of our programs, we actually work with much more, in-depth questions. Let me bring one of those in here. So here's an exercise we use in our Java class. And this is in the middle of the class where they're creating a simple weather app. So the code will go out, retrieve the weather from a weather API, bring it back in a format. I'm trying to remember if this is JSON or XML. One of the XML format looks like. Bring the back here and display it, and then they'll parse this weather and display some of the weather from this format. We use this when we're kind of talking about string and string manipulation ideas. But again, we give them some initial code that they have to start with. So they start with this code, and then we ask them to use, like, this is a procedure, use this procedure in this in the main program. So we have them open this up and then walk them through some details of what they should be doing for this. And then there's part 2. Now this gets a little harder to do in AI, but it does a pretty good job. Here's Gemini. So here so yeah, let's see if I can show. Yeah, here's my full prompt. So again, I asked it, I basically pasted the assignment in here. So pasted the long assignment, but then I said, here's the weather class. So I just pasted in the code for the weather class. It didn't go in very well as far as formatting, but ChatGPT is able to understand that fine. And then I say, help me understand this code and walk me through how to do this assignment. And it can walk through and do a pretty good job of explaining, again, with this code. And it is and I just asked it to explain the code, but it can also generate the solution for you if you want with this. So even if these longer assignments, and again, I've had students where we've had assignments where I've had 3 different files that are all working together, and they're supposed to do something with it, and students paste all 3 files and create this long prompt, and these systems can often do these assignments too. So I guess one thing I would, I've talked to some teachers and they said, well, yeah, they can, that's fine for some assignments. My assignments are so complicated that AI is not going to be helpful with them. So I just wanted to try to show you that our experience is that AI can solve a lot of these problems. And it can do the assignments. So then you're stuck with this. So it kind of reminds me of back in the day. I'm old enough to remember before calculators were common in schools. And when calculators being, introduced, and all of a sudden people were saying, how do we teach long division, or how do we teach, multiplication, where anyone could just take a calculator and bring it up and do a calculation there. And, we're seeing the same questions here. And again, not only here, but, so yeah, if you have assignments like this and you can just ask AI to solve them, yeah, similar, with writing assignments, if you have a writing assignment, AI can just do that writing assignment. It also, besides the calculator, I remember when in calculus and teaching calculus courses, all of a sudden AI started to be able to do all the differential equation, to do derivatives for you, to do integrals for you and stuff like that. And all of a sudden the teacher was saying, well, if the computer does this, if the students can cheat and get the answer, how do I teach this? So that's question again. If the student can get the answer, have some AI, some computer to get the answer, how do they learn? How do we get them to learn? And what do they have to learn for this? So again, my argument again is that students really need to know how to use these systems because, and I don't necessarily see this as cheating at least, and it might be because my students are in college and not in K through 12. And so they are a couple steps closer to the jobs. And again, I often am teaching students who have done a summer internship coding or software development, or being some sort of software analyst, and they're coming back and they're seeing these tools being used. And again, I don't think these are going to be avoidable. Like right now, this GitHub Copilot is not built into all these IDEs that we use. We use NetBeans, we use these other things, but I expect, just like, we're seeing it integrated in Word and Excel and stuff, that AI will be, these sort of copilots will be integrated and available to all students free. Currently, there are some free options. And again, often these are just providing much more detailed, what I would call code completion. It used to be, and we teach ideas. I'm a big fan of code completion stuff, where if you start typing a variable name or something like that, it fills in the rest of the variable name there. And if you hit dot, it brings up a list of possible methods or attributes you can call after that here. And so this is a more advanced version of this, where often you can type in a comment, say, I need to write, this is a procedure to do this. And then the procedure will fill in below, often gray until you okay it or whatever for that. So again, again, I'm just seeing some of this in my class, but I expect in the next year or two that this will be in all of our IDEs for this. And again, we're seeing a couple ways of doing this. A chat window in the environment. So you don't, like right now, I have, whenever I'm coding or teaching, I have an AI in one window and my IDE, my development environment in another window, and I've got to go cut and paste back and forth here. But again, in these integrated environments, there's a chat window within the IDE tied to like GitHub Copilot or something like that. Again, we get much smarter auto completion stuff. Again, I just haven't seen this free versions or versions for students available yet for this. Okay, I'm going to talk then. So if students can cheat and get the answers, but we expect them to have to use this software too, what do we do for our classes here? So as I mentioned earlier, I use this to generate a lot more examples. So you can use AI to, a lot of times it's very helpful, just brainstorm examples. One thing I struggle with sometimes is I can come up with examples in areas I'm interested in, but I struggle sometimes to come up with examples in other areas that I'm not interested in. But it's well shown that students are more engaged if they can be working on examples in fields they're interested in. So I don't really follow football or hockey, but I have a number of students who are big into football and hockey. And so, I was trying to do an example of, some players, keeping track of some data and stuff. So I had to look up, I know there's wide receivers in football. So what's the stat, ask what's the stats for wide receivers and how does that work? And, within a couple minutes working with AI, I was able to come up with an interesting example in American football, where and same there, an area like baking or what I do a fair amount of baking, and that's just, I know people who don't do baking, but recipes are often a good example here. So if you are not familiar with that, you can use AI to generate those sorts of examples for this. Other thing I suggest is to do more with code reviews for this. And that is just, and again, kind of talk to the next thing, having students explain their code and walk through their code for this. And I don't know how common this is at different levels and how you do, people do this, but I'll just walk through a couple things. What we see is in industry, code reviews are pretty common, that people will write code and then have to sit down with a couple peers and walk through the code. A number of companies have rules where code does not go into production unless it's seen by at least 2 sets of eyes. So you can't write code and then put it into production or get it into the product. You have to write code and it has to be reviewed or seen by someone else. So that usually means writing a code and then sitting down with 2 or 3 others and just explaining your code and having another set of eyes or 2 look the code understanding. And we didn't and still don't use it, I don't think, as much as we should in class, but we're now with these AI stuff, we're beginning to make that more prominent, where students can take their assignment and explain it and again, often we are doing peer reviews. 2 reasons. One is industry does a lot of peer reviews. So, but also there's benefit where the student who explains the code and then the students to understand another person's code. So this process of peer review, code reviews is beneficial, to the student doing, whose code it is, and the other one seeing someone else's code for this. So we're beginning to integrate that more in our classes. And again, part of this talks about writing, being able to get access to more code. And one thing we're seeing then is that, AI generates code, but it doesn't always generate the right code, and it doesn't always generate code exactly I want. So it's important. This writing code from scratch, I don't think is as important now, but being able to take some code and understand it, figure out if it fits your needs, and modify it and identify errors in it is going to be even a more important skill going forward with AI for this. The other thing we have been moving to, and we've actually been moving towards this for the last probably 5 years, is more student reflections. We used to just, almost all the assessment used to just be, here's a coding assignment, you write this code for this. But we had whole different assessments in areas that weren't coding, and so we'd have design documents and other, critiques and peer review, stuff. But when we did coding, it was always on those assignments, it was always can you, just submit the program, and if it runs and is successful, then you get full points here. And so I mean, it was not uncommon that the students who had friends in the class and shared, and we often saw code shared between friends, that they could do the assignments. But if a student was working by themselves and trying to do the program themselves, they couldn't. And it was kind of just this, we kind of ignored that for a long time. And then we finally moved more to student reflections about 5 years ago, where you will submit your code and you'll do a reflection on it for this. So we actually asked the student, so I don't know what, your experience is with student reflections, but ours is just, ask the student to describe often something that didn't go well. What did they struggle with in the code? What caused them some problems? And ask them about something that went well, with the code. What went smoothly with the code for this here. We use mobile CSP, and that asks often particular questions about the code, and we're doing that at times where, okay, you generated this code, tell me about this section or that section, where they have to, write an explanation for that. Students are, of course, creative, so if they can use AI to generate the code, they can use AI to generate the reflections on the code. So that's one thing we talk about with students, is where we want them to use AI and where we don't, and why for this. So in my class I teach, whenever I would use terms like reflection, a student reflection, or a student opinion, to me, I talk to my students quite a bit and explain that I do not want AI used in those areas for this, where we actually encourage them to use it on the assignments. Let me see if I have. Thank you. Let me just jump down, and show you. I'm just going to a sample reflection here. So again, they've done an assignment here. They're turning in the assignment, but they're also turning a reflection. So here we say, describe 2 difficulties and/or opportunities you encountered and how were they resolved or incorporated here. In your description, clearly indicate if you sought help from others, the internet, AI, and remember, you are encouraged to seek help from others, your instructors, TA, fellow students. Again, this makes it more clear that on this assignment, they can seek help from other students, where in the past, it wasn't always clear on that, what that was. And again, they can search the web for suggestions or ask AI for help. So we kind of list out all the, ways that we encourage students to get help. But then we want them to reflect on their assignment and what it does. And then we ask them to clearly describe how you implement these items in an incremental way. So we just don't want a I asked my friend and my friend sent me the answer, or I asked AI and AI gave me the answer. I want an incremental solution to this. And we talked about that in class, is that, so again, generally what I want them to do is to try it on their own, and then seek help, and then take that, incorporate, and not just take the solution and replace their own, but incorporate that solution into how to fix their own examples of it for this. So that's what we're often doing as far as a reflection goes for this. The last thing we do is we continue to do a lot of pair programming. You know, yeah. Ralph, did you have a question? No. Okay. So we continue to do a lot of pair programming here. It's a well-proven equity-based method, and we see it used in industry. And there we do the same thing where students are explaining code to each other for this. So, okay. So that kind of wraps up where I'm at for this. Any questions on this?
Thank you, Phil, for your share. Thank you so much.
Yeah, hopefully you'll use this, and hopefully we can see some for this. Oh, I'm gonna wrap this up. Let me stop sharing. All right. So Liz, thanks for organizing and getting this done. So it's very useful. So